We have come together to study Kathopanishad. Katha means the story, and the story is one of the best told stories to a young child in the Vedic culture, in the Hindu culture. And here we see that in Katha Upanishad all the various tenets, all the various practices and the goal that we are to achieve. And what is the goal? It is Brahma Vidya. Brahma Vidya means the knowledge of Brahman, and that is very clearly, explicitly, vividly explained in this Kathopanishad. We all know the story will come to, because the text begins, when the Upanishad begins, it will take us through the story. But just a general understanding of life. We know that the root of all problems in our life is what? Is ignorance, isn't it? Ignorance of what? Ignorance of our own essential nature. And because of this ignorance, man is continuously living, thinking, this body I am. And he is reinforcing it, and he doesn't keep repeating it. That reinforcing is not through repetition, but it's just once he has accepted it, and he has accepted it so deeply that he continues to say, body am I, body am I, body I am, body I am, body I am, and never even thinks of an alternative. While keeping on thinking that body I am, this body I am thought itself is the product of ignorance. See? And this has to be removed. This has to give way. This has to give way to what? To I am that, who is everything, who is eternal, who is inside and outside, who is unborn, who is blissful, who is all-knowing. And as long as we keep reinforcing to ourselves that I am this body only, if she doesn't give you food for lunch, you see what the body I am notion, how quickly it will come up. And the stomach will make its noise, the body will make noise. Car also makes noise when the petrol finishes. You have to fill up the petrol. So you will feel like filling up the petrol. See? So this has to be removed. So here in Kathopanishad one mantra comes, Sammodate modaniyam hi labdva, having attained this eternal Atman, the blissful Atman, the blissful self within, one becomes happy. This is one of the statements which will come in the Kathopanishad. To think that we can get happiness by indulging in the world is an impossibility. True happiness only comes from abiding in the self. And towards this, the Kathopanishad is a dialogue between a young seeker and the Lord of the Death. And in that Lord of the Death, in that conversation, we see how the Lord of Death, Yamraj, he lures this young boy with all the riches of the world. And that child wants to know only one thing. What is that by knowing which I'll come to know everything? And in this manner, he eventually attains. And this attainment, when we use the word attainment, we feel that attainment is like, I attained, I gave you the book, now you have got it. Is self like getting a book? Is self like eating the food and becoming one with the food? Is self like I am seeing you and now I know you? Is it like this? No, it is not like this. It's just a knowingness without a thought. It's a knowingness without a thought. Nothing needs to be done. No experience needs to take place. So, first point, that attainment of the blissful self is not like attaining a fruit. You have brought some fruits, peaches, what else? Mangoes, bananas, and what else you got? Pears and watermelon, sweet melon. So it is not like attaining a fruit. There's nothing is going to happen. If you are looking for an experience of realization, you are going the wrong way. But many people, they don't understand this and they want something to happen. Either someone was telling me, now my mind is becoming empty. But that is not realization. I am feeling heat in my body. That is not realization. I am seeing light in my forehead. That is not realization. Realization, there is no sign of realization for the person who is getting realized. It's the most ordinary of the experiences. And towards this, therefore, our scriptures say, this also comes in the first chapter, third part of the first chapter in the Kathopanishad, and this is a very famous statement called, says, Uttishta Jagrata Prapya Varan Nibodhata, means Uttishta, wake up, arise, Jagrata, wake up, Prapya Varan Nibodhata, and stop not till you reach the goal. Arise, awake, stop not till you reach the goal. How many times we must have heard it? How many times we must have said that to ourselves? Because I have also studied this Upanishad now, second time I am studying it, second or third time. See? So arise to what? Arise to the world. We are already awake to the world. Arise to your own essential being, the blissful self. Arise, awake to what? Awake not to the waker, the dreamer and the deep sleeper. Not become awake to the wars that are going on, the religions that are expressing and fighting with each other, the people, the jealousies, the angers, the greeds, the hypocrisies. It's all very nice, social discussion topics. But we are not telling you to be awake to that. The scriptures tell us, be awake to yourself. Raise yourself. There is a statement that comes in Bhagavad Gita. It says, the meditation is raising yourself to meet yourself. Raising yourself to meet yourself. What do you mean by this? How can I raise myself to meet myself? Then that statement is then imagined. Oh, the Kundalini from within you rises and takes you to the top. You think you are that individual and you have to become the total. You think you are the ignorant and you have to become the wise. This is arising. This is awakening. This is what they think. I am not saying that this is what scriptures say. This is what people think arising and awaking means. Arising and awaking, in that arising and awaking there is no journey. It is a journeyless journey. But till that journeyless journey, the destinationless destination is not reached, till then it feels as if some journey is being performed. So therefore here it says, Uttishta Jagrata, arise, awake, and know it, realize it. How do we know it and realize it? Is it through the books? How do we come to know? So here it is told, by sitting at the feet of sages and realized masters. That's where our feet must take us. And when we sit at their feet and listen, only listening, no reading, no cassettes, only listening, active listening will bring that about. And when that happens, then the knowledge of that knowledge which is heard and digested and contemplated upon by a seeker, by an aspirant of the truth who wants to arise himself and awaken himself to his own self, in that process he destroys the ignorance that is expressing as body I am I concept. So in this, see, there is a beggar or there is a bullock, we will take a beggar, and a beggar can also be sitting outside an ashram in India and a lecture is going on Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads and he listens. And then when he meets his fellow beggars, he says, what are you begging for? I am not begging, I am dispassionate. I am not attached to anything. That's why, see, I don't collect anything. Beggar's language. Beggar is saying, is that what it is? Anyone can read the book, anyone can listen from here and there, anyone can listen to lectures on the CDs, and variety, there is no end to it. So much is there. And we can, like a parrot, we can reproduce it. And like a parrot, we can reproduce it, including teachers. That's what they do. Most of them. They reproduce. But what do we have to do? Having read, having listened, then we have to sit with that, brood over that, contemplate over that, ruminate over that, and allow that which is hidden behind the words to reveal itself. So don't be a superficial seeker who feels that coming to a retreat, coming to a lecture, and feels that I am spiritual. I am not judging anyone here. We are making a statement. Don't feel that you are giving lectures, so you are a cut above the others. No, you are not. Don't remain, the scriptures are saying, don't remain in that imaginary world that by taking a few classes, attending a few classes, attending a few retreats or taking a few retreats, we have come to know. All we have done is intellectually appreciate what the goal is. Intellectual appreciation, such people become intellectually miserable also afterwards. So, whatever is heard, whatever is understood, about whatever the clarity has come, that clarity must convert itself into a direct experience. Knowing that curry puffs was on the menu, it's good. But until unless we become one with the curry puffs, the experience will not take place, and it will not take place because they are left in Lara. So, it's a long journey back to retrieve them. So, important thing is whatever, see, yesterday someone was telling me that, Swamiji, many times I have heard, I have read, and I have been thinking, what does it mean to have an out-of-body experience? What does it mean to heal yourself? And I heard, he was just listening to one person on the video. And such people only then get confused and then come. Because they don't follow a pattern from beginning till the end. So you listen and suddenly, oh, in life is not about, I want to know what is out-of-body experience. I want to know what is no mind. I want to know all the chakras and all the nadis that are flowing through the body. I want to know, and then I want to know what is subtle body. I said, you can never come to know. Why? Suddenly, when I said you will not come to know, it stopped his verbal diarrhea. It suddenly stopped. Why will I not come to know? I said, right now you think you are the body? Yes. As long as you keep thinking that you are the body, you can never have the experience of the subtle body. No, the master said this. He was saying that it is possible. So, go and listen to it again. He went to listen to it again, came back, still he couldn't. No. How can a person who is identified to physical body experience the pranic body or the subtle body? Can't. How can effect know the cause? Cannot. And then half an hour of explanation. You have to come out of the physical body or experience that, and then the pranic body. While I am physical body, do I know everything inside it? No. Do I have the vision? No. So when I am in the pranic body, will I come to know everything? No. But as a pranic body, I can come to know the physical body. As the subtle body, I can come to know the pranic body and the physical body. So from top, if I look down, then it is possible. But while being in the physical body and wanting to know everything, not possible. The idea has to be dropped that I am the body. Till then, further knowledge is not possible. And that was with him. So when we listen to various Upanishads, which we have done quite a few times now, this is I think the seventh Upanishad we are doing now. We will have, after every Upanishad, we have absolute clear understanding of who we essentially are, isn't it? There is no ambiguity. Clarity is there, but abidance is not there. And that abidance can come about only when we practice on a daily basis, initially, and then hourly basis, and then every moment. That which you have become convinced of as regards to the essential nature. Until unless it does not become a 24/7 job with you, it will not happen. See, when a woman becomes a mother or a man becomes a father, once you are a father, at the back of your mind, the well-being of your child is always there, isn't it? Whatever it may be, it's always there. Your whole life, if you watch yourself, those who are, and I don't know about you, if you worry too much about Catherine, but those who are, every activity in your life is being dictated by wanting to provide, care, nurture that child of yours, isn't it? When this, and why is this happening? Because I have made the first mistake, and that mistake was I am the body. And therefore, when I am the body, then I have got another body and I create a relationship with it. Because, why do I create a relationship with someone outside? Because I have not created a relationship with myself, who I am. When your life starts being dictated by the thought that I am that blissful self, I am that all-knowing self, I am the master of this universe, I am the one who is inside and outside, there is no place that I am not. When this thought dictates your life, then alone spiritual journey has started. So first is conviction. Remember the few steps. First is information gathering. When we listen to scriptures, we are gathering information. Then that information must be contemplated upon, reflected upon, and doubts must be removed. The less the doubt, the more the conviction. No doubt, full conviction. Now you have got convinced completely. Are you all convinced completely? I am asking a question. Are you convinced completely about the nature of the essential nature? If there was not even one doubt left with regards to the essential nature, it will happen. The reason it is not happening is we are still not convinced. We have maybe 80% we have understood. Maybe you have understood 90%. Maybe you have understood 99% about as to what your essential nature is. But that 1%, that 0.00001% is enough to not allow you to abide in yourself. See? So it has to be every doubt with regards to who we are, where are we going wrong, why is it not happening, why am I not able to abide when I am the one and I have to, it's the journey from myself to myself, then why it is not taking place? There is nowhere to go, there is nothing to seek, there is nothing to know. Everything is here only, where I am. Then what's the difficulty? The difficulty is, I have considered and accepted that I am the product of the world, that I am limited, that I am conditioned, that I have a birth, that I have a death, and in this way a person who is having all these thoughts as the premise on which he or she has based his life, such a person finds it very difficult to abide in their own essential nature. So what do we require? That to have this peace, the blissful self, the Atman, I am going to use the word Atman. Blissful self sounds too long. This Atman, the self within, for it to be revealed, what is required? It requires a pure mind, a calm mind, a concentrated mind, and these are the prerequisites. You cannot say that my mind is agitated and say I am realized also. You cannot say that why this is happening, and all these type of questions about the creation and yourself are there, and say, oh, but I know who I am. No, you are living in an imaginary world of knowing. Once you know, there is no doubt left about anything. Is it that you have to know everything about the world? What is that? See, you can go into the world, about space there is lots to know, about air there is lots to know, about fire there is lots to know, about water there is lots to know, about the earth there is lots to know, about the plant kingdom there is lots to know, about animal kingdom lots to know, about human kingdom lots to know. Is that knowing? So how can you know the world? In one, say that?
Why not know yourself?
Yes. You can know the knowledge about the world is one single point. In one way you can come. That which is changing is the world. Nothing to get serious about. Rather than, because the more you think about the world, the more interest will develop in it. And as long as the interest in the world is there, till then the inward journey will not begin. Because the outside, which is the variety, which is so enchanting, it is continuously demanding your attention. Like for the next 7 days, we will be looking forward to the breakfast, we will look forward to the dinner, lunch and dinner. We are looking forward. Why? What's new coming up? We have lost the plot. If we can look forward to knowing the self in spite of all the experiences that the life is presenting us, then there is a possibility. So here it is told, na virato duscharitat, na shanto na samahitaha, na shantamanaso vapi prajnane nainamapnuyat. This is also a verse in the Kathopanishad, and it says, one who is indulged always in vicious actions and desirous of various sensual enjoyments, and who has got no concentrated mind, cannot attain Atman through knowledge. A dissipated mind is not a fit instrument to convert knowledge into experience. This is so apt. Yesterday we did the topic of dharana, isn't it? What is dharana? Dharana means the ability to concentrate the mind on one theme unbroken to the exclusion of everything else. That is dharana, that is concentration. When we are able to think that I am the master of the world, when we are able to think that I am the one who is pervading the entire world, when I can think that I don't have a beginning and an end, I am eternal. Yes, intellectually first accept that. When you accept that, then your language will be different when you talk to anyone. When your mind gets concentrated on that, it does not get distracted by the one day England versus Australia or the semi-finals or quarter-finals of the tennis matches that are going on. It doesn't get distracted by hunger. It doesn't get distracted by anything in this world. Meaning, you don't know what the world is going to throw at you as the next experience. If you do not lose your poise in spite of moving through this world and not compromise, so what is that poise? That poise is gained only by contemplating about the self in the back of your mind. Then for such a person, there is a possibility of ignorance to be removed. And in this Upanishad, it is told that the first thing that a person must cultivate within his life is dispassion towards the world. If the world is an impediment, if the world is the enchantress who is luring us to herself again and again and again, I must cultivate dispassion. And dispassion means not running away from the world and living in a cave. Dispassion or vairagya means, in spite of everything being around you, not getting disturbed by it. That is dispassion. The more the dispassion towards the world, this is a formula, the more the dispassion towards the world, the more is your mind pure, the more is your mind uncluttered, the more is your mind free, the more is your mind expanded. Naturally, in such a mind, contemplation begins. Naturally, in such a mind, concentration, relaxed concentration happens. But a mind which is cluttered with things to do and not to do and achieve and ambition and success and judgment and all this, for such a mind, make your mind concentrated, he will do, what do I do, how do I fix my mind, where do I do it? And then gets a headache. You drop the word from the mind, automatic concentration is achieved. Concentrated mind does not mean just, this is a way of saying, concentrated mind means when the point is sharp, isn't it? This is how we understand. I don't have a pencil. So it's a sharp point which can pierce through everything. But here we are talking, concentrated mind is an expanded mind. Now I have taken, scriptures have taken even that concept of concentration out of your system. It has presented you with a paradox. That concentrated mind is an expanded mind. Now how do you work it out? So am I concentrating or am I expanding? So it has to be relaxed concentration. When you are relaxed, whenever you think about something in a relaxed poise, try sometime at home. You think of a person, that person will call you. So if I can make a person call me, not by concentration but by relaxed concentration, then if I in that relaxed poise, I think about the self, will now self call me? The rule is same. So, to be a seeker of the truth and not have this quality of dispassion towards the world. These two go together. You cannot be a seeker of truth and say, no, I love this world. It cannot be. When I say I love this world, from desire point of view. A seeker of the truth has to be necessarily dispassionate towards the world. And as a result, his mind frees up, and as a result of that free mind, he is able to discriminate clearly between the truth and the untruth. This is just a preamble that I am giving you before we get into the Upanishad. So we understand that all of us are starting from the same level of understanding. So, yada pancha vatishtante jnanani manasa saha buddhischa vicheshtati tamahu paramam gatim tam yogamiti manyante sthiram indriya dharanam. So here it is told that the great yogis of the past, they used to say that our five senses and the mind have to be controlled, and only when the five senses, which are continuously interacting in the world, desiring to gain the stimuli of the world, getting distracted by the stimuli of the world, and in other words, the senses are getting disturbed because the mind is having certain desires. So mind also gets disturbed. Until unless the senses, the five senses, seeing, hearing, touching, feeling, tasting, and the sixth sense, which is the mind, until unless they have not been quietened down, till then the intellect will not become steady. Steady intellect means what? A flame is burning. Normally the flame keeps going like this, isn't it? There is always a wave in it. But in a room with no breeze coming in, that flame is continuously upwards. There is hardly any movement in it. And this is the example that is given about a steady intellect. If there are too many stimuli disturbing the mind, the discrimination in the intellect, even though you have understood, even though you have come to a satsang, even though you have come to a retreat, you have understood what the self is, but you are not able to stay with the self because it is continuously up, down, up and down, up and down, up and down. But if the mind and the senses are controlled, then when you think about the self, there is no disturbance. And for 1 day, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 lecture, 2 lecture, 3 lecture, not 1 day or 2 days, not 1 week or 2 weeks, not 1 year or 2 years, as long as it is required, you never get tired of contemplating on the self. Never get tired. And that is only possible when the senses and the mind are curtailed. And therefore the first step is told. Yama, in Yoga Sutra also same thing. Yama is, do not get disturbed by the world, do not disturb the world. Niyama is, live a disciplined lifestyle. Then according to Vedanta, these two steps are called Shama and Dhamma. Shama means control of the mind, and Dhamma is called control of the senses. Until unless these two are not done, the third stage according to Yoga Sutra, which is called Pratyahar. According to Vedanta, it is called Uparama. Uparama means that the mind does not want to go out of the senses anymore. Just like, I'll give you an example. You are here I'm sure at this moment there are no thoughts of what is going on at your home, what is your husband or wife doing, what are your children doing, what is your cat doing, what is happening in the world. Has somewhere floods come again, or war has started again? Nothing, isn't it? And now that I have said, you may have spent a second thinking, and then it's gone. It's not staying with you. You just dropped it. So you know what dropping means. So you drop the world and you come here. Now you have to drop the mental world also. And I just shown you what dropping means. You have done that. So for that, and if the mental world is not dropping, it is only because somewhere within your bosom there is a longing for that world. There is a longing to see my child. There is a longing to taste the mango. There is a longing to hear nice music. There is a longing to appreciate the chirping of the birds. No, but is that not divine? Mind can come up with this doubt, isn't it? It's always chattering. So it will say, what do you mean? That then what's the point of living if everything we have to deny? But are you here to prove whether the world is there or not? Or are you here to seek fulfillment in your life by knowing your essential nature? First determine this. Don't get confused. And if the goal is to know your essential nature, then the scriptures are saying you have to give the world up through dispassion and then rediscover it. Then rediscover it. And that rediscovering the world will be the divine discovery. Where your understanding of the world is that world is nothing but I. Nothing but me. Right now, that is not our experience, isn't it? So, it is told that without dispassion and without concentration of the mind, the realization of the essential nature is an impossibility. And towards this, there will be some exercises given within the Kathopanishad. Intellectual appreciation of the of the scriptures is only the first stage. When we come and hear, that is the first stage. Then what? It must be followed up with intense desire, an intense feeling of never being content within your mind that I know it. If this thought has come, I know what Brahman is, I know that I am, I know anything you say, I know it, then understand the intellectual virus has started. And we say sometimes, isn't it? We get caught up in this, so we have to get out of that. And as I said before, listening to scriptures, listening to the Upanishads is only the first step. After that, we have to do the reflection, that is, remove the doubts. The lesser the doubt, more is the conviction. And when conviction reaches a point of no return, that's when the three steps, the dharana, dhyana, samadhi, these three steps begin. When conviction has reached to such a level that now you don't want to get convinced anymore. You don't have to prove to yourself who you are. It's always there with you. Then Dharana Dhyan Samadhi begins. So in our Vedic culture, in our Sanatan Dharma, in the two things are there, that is religion and science. And both of their purpose is to make this life to be lived more beautifully. Science is also trying to make us newer and newer gadgets, newer and newer understandings, so that our life becomes easy and happy. If it becomes, the sun comes out, if we don't have a fan, we'll be all crying, we'll be sweating. So it will be nice that there is a fan and there is some breeze. Without science, we won't have a fan. Similarly, religion is also trying to do the same thing. It is also trying to make our life a more complete one in its own way. And these two paths are not contrary to each other. They are just steps of the same ladder. Or you can say they are both parallelly moving towards the same destination. But science, just physical science, what we understand is today only about the scientist, and that scientist persona has been painted in our picture, who is in the laboratory trying to mix and match different things and trying to discover new things. No, but in our culture, even the yogis were scientists. And they were finding newer and newer ways through concentration. It was getting revealed to them, and those revelations they were presenting to the mankind, to the humanity, and whatever they were revealed with, it was for making the humanity a more happier humanity. Because if humanity is not, the only purpose of human being is one, to seek more happiness, isn't it? That's why you eat, that's why you come here, that's why you buy a car, that's why you wear clothes of different textures, that's why you make the hair the way you make it. Everything is done in your life only to gain happiness. But science can take you only to a certain extent. Then religion takes over. And these yogis, they practiced in their own quiet moments away from the society, having controlled their senses, having controlled their mind, and making themselves available. See, if you just make your mind concentrated extremely by controlling your senses and mind, and the urge is there within you that I want to help the society, I want to help this humankind to be more happy. Oh great divine, please reveal something by which it becomes a more happy humanity. Something will be revealed. But you have to sustain that concentration. That is how discoveries are taking place. That is how a person becomes a monk. You don't become a monk. My childhood dream used to be that I want to become a person who takes seminars for children and teenagers. That was my dream. One of the dreams. Why? And that was, I don't know why, but I got in the school, I got a chance to become, the vice principal came, we were talking and we thought that you will be a right candidate for the school prefect. And the moment I heard school prefect, which means I have to make everyone listen to me, that means, and I am only a shorty, others are taller than me and stronger than me, suddenly the fear came in. I said, no, I don't want any. I didn't want that responsibility. No, you will be good. You are not belonging to any group. You're always aloof. You will be, and you are friendly to everyone. You can become. No, I don't want. But that urge has somehow over the decades expressed in whichever way I am expressing now. See? As a teacher, as a student, I could not express, I did not have the abilities. Today, I have some abilities to cater to some section of the society. Great masters have such ability that they can cater to millions of people at a given time, isn't it? You have to keep growing. But they also started from somewhere. You also have to start from somewhere. So don't understand religion that we should not deny the science and we should not become religious. We are new age scientists. New age scientists are what? New age people. They don't want to use the word religion. A religion only means religion, reunite, that's all. But our understanding and connotation of religion is that with which all the superstitions is there, the rituals are there, the mantras are there, strict life is there. That's the idea that we have, and we want to, we are the moderns, we are new age people. We are not religious people. Don't call me religious. Religious just means a person who wants to unite with himself. And that's the greatest vocation that one can have in life. And knowingly or unknowingly that person is doing that anyway. So, to bring about this unity within ourselves, we find that there are many different paths. There is the path of devotion, there is the path of knowledge, there is the path of action, and there is the path of mysticism. These are the four paths. The path of devotion is the path of blind faith. It is emotional in nature. It is the journey of opening the heart. Nothing to do with head here. Open the heart. I love you. I can't live without you. And you are obsessed with that divine principle. And in this, it works for some people. There is nothing wrong. And such people, they are those who are emotional in nature, for them it is the best. You try to give them understanding, it will not sink in. Give them devotion. Ask them what is your deity, and to such the scriptures say, oh, you are following Jesus, okay, take the Alleluia. If you are following Krishna, okay, chant Krishna, 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 Krishna. Oh, you are from Shiva, Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shiva. Because he loves that persona so much that he feels inspired to dedicate his life to that ideal. And in that he is incessantly chanting, and as he keeps chanting the name of the Lord, does not want to understand anything. No, I just know that the Lord is everything. What is Lord? How can you ask that question? But you tell a person who is following the path of knowledge, he will write a book on what is Lord. For a devotee, he does not want to know. He says he will reveal. I am not concerned what he is. And he is just happy taking the name of the Lord, but as a result of taking the name of the Lord and loving him for whoever he is, or whatever his idea about the Lord is, his senses get withdrawn from the world. His mind gets less agitated. All the agitations or thoughts in the mind, concepts in the mind, ideas in the mind, the commissions and omissions in the mind are replaced by the name of the Lord. And as a result, when enough concentration in the mind is achieved, a concentrated mind is an integrated mind. Understand? It is not a dissipated mind, it is integrated. It's a synchronized one. In such a mind, then the Lord reveals. And when the Lord reveals how? He says, oh my God, the Lord is in me. And that by the grace of that Lord, he does not understand anything. But by the grace of the Lord, he sees the Lord expressing everywhere in the creation. In every tree, in every animal, in every blade of grass, in every leaf, in every aspect of the creation, he is seeing the divine, he is seeing the divine, he is seeing the divine. Many people stop at this point. And only few rare ones are there. And till here they have come without thinking. The only thought they had is, I love my Lord, that's it. And it is okay. But there are few rare ones who come to this point and they see the Lord revealing within, the presence of the Lord within and without. Then they say, the Lord is, I am having the experience of divinity within and I am having the experience of divinity without. Then who the hell am I? Who am I then? He didn't say, who the hell am I? Who am I? And the moment that question pops up, and it is not something that you can train someone, it happens. And when that question pops up, the divinity says, thank you. And now instead of experiencing the divine within his body, within his mind and without in the world, he becomes one with the divine. That is the path of devotion. That is the ultimate. Then comes the path of knowledge. The path of knowledge is the path of head, intellectualism. And in this, you are told, practice dispassion towards the world, practice discrimination about the truth and the untruth, and purify the mind. And the best way to purify the mind is by contemplating and becoming clearer and clearer about who you essentially are. And you proceed and proceed and proceed, and eventually, as a result of this purification of the mind, and all this is happening by understanding. It is not happening in blind belief. That devotee did not know who the God is. Here you know who you are, you know what the mind is, you know how it gets attracted outside, how to curb it, how to control it, and you practice all that. And eventually, in the path of knowledge also, you come to the point, then who is this witness? What is the essential nature of this witness? Who am I then? And again, the same. Now comes the third path. What was it? The path of action. Path of action. Those people who say we must do something in life, only then realization is possible. And what is the doing? The rituals. What is the doing? Oh, I must build temples, I must start ashrams, I must start orphanages, I must do this, I must do that. When I must do this, I must do that, I must improve the world because it is in such a dilapidated state right now. Who are these people? These are the people who are following the path of action. And why they are following this? Because sometimes their mind has blind faith about the Lord. Sometimes their mind is oscillating towards the knowledge. So it's like a yo-yo. Sometimes they are in the head, sometimes they are in the heart. Sometimes they are in the head, sometimes they are in the heart. Sometimes they are in the head, sometimes they are in the heart. So they are not able to stand firm in one position. A devotee, if I don't want to think, I just want to feel. Intellectual, I don't want to feel, I want to think. Everything through logic. But those people who are confused, they are a mixture of feeling and thinking and are not able, and every one of us is. But we are not able to take a position. For such people, the path of action is there. That you go, serve the world and do whatever actions you do without expecting a result. That is the path of action. And yet there is another path, and that is the path of mysticism, in which we have the Hatha Yoga, we have the Kundalini Yoga, we have all the different types of yogas, by way of which, by following certain exercises, you invoke the energies and gain some esoteric experiences, and those esoteric experiences eventually lead you into deep samadhi. And when in samadhi your mind is able to remain for a long period of time without thinking, with no thoughts, somewhere along the line this thought will come. Who is this? Who am I who is experiencing there is no thought? So from every angle, whether you take the devotion, whether you take path of knowledge, whether you take path of action, what path of action does, I did not tell. If you live your life performing the actions without expecting any result, mind will get purified. A purified mind will again want to sit in meditation, will again want to find more and more about itself, what is its source, and eventually it will lead to that point. And in Hatha Yoga and Kundalini Yoga, after having experienced all the mystical experiences by way of various exercises, then what next? Because experiences come and go. What next? So we see that paths are many. When they begin, they seem to be all different. But as the mind becomes purified, becomes subtler and subtler, we find all of them reach to one point only. And that point is, who am I then? Who is experiencing the experiences, mystical experiences? Who is this meditator? Who is this one who wants to know who am I? And who is this Lord? Who is this me who is experiencing the Lord within and without? So from everything, when you reach the peak, this is the point. And that is the highest knowledge. And one must seek that, one must discover that, one must contemplate on that. And in this way, we don't have to concentrate on the world and remove, like when we go to a rose plant in our garden, what do you look at? When you go to the rose plant, what do you look at? The flower. But there may be one or two flowers, but there are more thorns on it. So why your attention is not going to the thorns, which are many in number, and only on one or two flowers that the plant is producing? Similarly, don't think about the thorns of the world, the commissions and omissions of the world. You contemplate on the pure fragrance that is your essential nature. And when you think about the flower, automatically you are not disturbed by the prickliness of the thorns, isn't it? The hand goes, even if it is feeling some thorns, nicely, carefully, it plucks and comes out, isn't it? Gets the flower. So in your life, we must also thorn pricks. Flower gives the nectar, flower gives the fragrance, flower gives the beauty. So our journey in life should also be like this. We should not be continuously pushing against each other. This is my seat. Make way for me. Make way for my ego. And continuously dashing here and dashing there and dashing there. And all of us are guilty about it, isn't it? And sometimes, if not physically, mentally we are dashing against other people. Verbally we are dashing against, reacting to everyone in the world. The path, the spiritual journey is a path of compassion, a path of understanding, a path of sublimation, a path of absorption. It's a path of patience. You don't have to force anything to happen in your life. Allow. You cannot force. You must have heard it many times now. You can't force a bud to become a flower, isn't it? It has to take its time. Similarly, allow the bud, which is expressing as absolute clarity in your mind that I am that essential self. Allow it to flower. Allow it to flower. And in this manner, we see how we the various paths we just saw. And this is the technique of living that is presented to us by the various, by the religion, and so that we become more than what we are today, and eventually recognize the essential nature within ourselves. Every path takes us till the point of pratyahara. All the paths are more or less different. But from pratyahara onwards, which is dharana, dhyan, samadhi. Dharana is concentration. Dharana, dhyan, that concentration leads to deep concentration without a break. And eventually that deep concentration leads to no concentration, which is samadhi. Our efforts are to come to the point of dharana. Once you do the dharana, that means by controlling the senses and the mind, you reach that point. After that, it's a self-propelling process. Don't have to do much. And that is why the regularity in our daily life is an essential requirement. And this is what, whether you take Islam, whether you take Christianity, whether you take Hinduism, whether you take Buddhism, whether you take Jainism, all of them which we call as religions, they are essentially teaching us this. Come to know that divine spark within yourself, come to know that spiritual center within yourself. Whichever path you may take does not matter. So now understanding a little bit more about the journey to this, the divine spark within, the journey again from the Vedantic point of view. Here we see that the first is we have the food sheath, then we have the vital air sheath, which is called the breath, Third is the mental sheath, which is called the mind. The fourth is called the intellectual sheath, which is called the intellect. And the last is called the bliss sheath, which is the causal aspect of our personality. And as long as and this, when we talk about the 5 layers, it is not that the food sheath is here, then the vital layer is, then the vital layer is inside, then the mind is inside. It seems to be like that. Therefore, we are always meditating inside. But contrary is the truth, that the subtler you become, the more expansive you are. It seems to us that the water is being kept in place by the various continents on the planet. But contrary is true, that the earth, which is the land which is expressing on this planet, is being kept in place by the waters. It seems that the water is keeping the earth cool. But the contrary is the truth. The core of the earth is a molten lava. And that is the fire, the energy that is allowing water and earth to express on this planet. And it's at the right temperature that is required. On other planets it is not. So same way, within us, these 5 sheaths are there. These 5 sheaths, you can go within also and you go without also. Both ways, microcosm as well as macrocosm. So at the totality level also, there is a food sheath, the gross body, there is a vital body, there is a mental body, and there is an intellectual body and a causal body. At the microcosm also, there is these 5 levels. And at the individual level, we call this gross body, and at the total level, gross body is called Virat. At the individual level, the mind is called Tejas, and at the total level, the mind is called Hiranyagarbha, in which all the desires of all the individuals are present but not unmanifested yet. See? Then we have the causal state, which is called Prajna, and the total causal state, the bliss sheath state, is called as Ishvara, the Lord Himself. So we see the individual and the total, they are both mirror images. So what is the difference? So now when I say individual and total, that total is not somewhere, here only. So what is the difference? The difference is we are slaves to these 5 sheaths, and the Ishvara, the Lord, the total, is the master of his 5 sheaths. That's the only difference. That has to be brought about and transcended. So when I was saying that a devotee comes to this point where I feel this, experience the divinity within and without, he has come to that point. But next, there is one more. Then who is experiencing this within and without as divine? So understand, these 5 sheaths are there, and I will not go into the detail of each one. The food sheath is made up of it survives, its nourishment is the gross food that we eat. The vital air sheath is again available because of the pranas, that is the oxygen that we breathe in, and that oxygen goes in and nourishes it multiplies itself into 5 pranas, which go to nourish the body, to digest the food, to circulate the blood in our body, and to and to evacuate and to throw out the things that are not required by the body, like cough, phlegm, etc. So that is the part of that. Then there comes the mental sheath, and in the mental sheath, what mental sheath in us is the mind, and that mind is where mind is defined as the thought flow, where the thoughts are coming and going incessantly. That is the mental sheath. And because these thoughts are coming and going and they are not determined, there is no determining factor there. Therefore, this mind is called the doubting Tom. Tom is because of the Britishers, but it's called the doubting principle. The doubts don't come from here, from the mind. And when in the intellectual sheath, is where the concept, the ideas and the judgment, all this is determined, and the clearer the determination is, the less doubts are. Understand? About anything, including the self. So, each faculty has its job, and the bliss sheath, the last one, it is made up of negativity, or it is made up of ignorance. And this ignorance is the cause of every subsequent sheath. So out of ignorance came the intellect. Out of that came the mind and intellect. They are both just functional differences. Then because of them came the breath, and because of them came the body. Each one is dependent on the next one. And all of these came out of ignorance. If ignorance was not there, or deep sleep was not there, or the bliss sheath was not there, all the three mean the same, then the other four sheaths that we see ourselves to be, they would not have expressed themselves. Now, why you are taking only 5 sheaths? Why can't there be 7 sheaths? You can multiply more also, no problem. There is no end. But we have to start somewhere. We have taken that the scriptures are telling us these are the 5 sheaths, and it is your experience also. You are a physical organism, you are a breathing organism, you are a thinking organism, you are a determining organism, and every night you become a dull, inert organism. So it's the experience of everyone. Can you tell me of any other organism apart from these 5? Anything else is there, it will come within these 5. So, in this way, and in this bliss sheath we see, where this bliss sheath is not one per person, it is one for all. So, this is the background before we get into the text proper. And here we see that these 5 sheaths that are given, they have to become integrated with each other. It is not that I am only going to work on the intellect, I am going to work only on the breath. No. A smart person, he will work on all of them on a daily basis. Eat proper food with the senses, see proper things, hear proper things, taste proper things, remembering the divine all the time. Breathe, not. No, deep breathe, have a deep breath out. Let there be conscious breathing. Be very careful as to what thoughts you allow to enter in your mind. Be even more careful as to what concepts and ideas you form in your mind based on which you are leading your life. So all this is required. And if this sounds to be very difficult, you keep thinking, what is the divine life spark within me, and everything will start falling in place. But if you think that you have to do something, then you can do all this. And we flip. Sometimes we are the body, sometimes we are the breath, sometimes we are the mind, sometimes we are the intellect. It's not that all the time we are intellectual, it's not that all the time we are a gross body, isn't it? At the body level, our expression is, our desire is of comfort and discomfort. So many times we are comfortable, sometimes we are uncomfortable. At the level of breath, the expression is of hunger and thirst. So sometimes we are hungry, sometimes we are thirsty. Sometimes we are comfortable, sometimes we are uncomfortable. At the level of mind, it is about joys and sorrows based on likes and dislikes. So suddenly now, not only we are comfortable and discomfortable, hungry and thirsty, another set of pair is added. We are joy and sometimes we are joyful, sometimes we are sorrowful. And at the intellectual level, sometimes we are praised and sometimes we are insulted. Another pair is added. Sometimes we are honored, sometimes we are dishonored. So, an intelligent approach to life is that do not react to these opposites that the life is throwing at you. And maintain a poise of remembering that because of which all these experiences are possible. If this is practiced on a daily basis, the destination is not far away. It will be caught very quickly, very soon. And we conclude here with this. And this is what our sages of yore, this is what our saints, this is what our rishis of the past have, for whom? For the benefit of the humanity. Could the scriptures, this Kathopanishad, could it have just come by chance? No, it has to come to someone. E is equal to mc square was possible only to a human being. It was a revelation to Einstein. Why? He was prepared for it. The gravity which was always present was revealed to Newton. Why? Because he was available for it. He was contemplating on that principle without knowing that it is called gravity. But he was thinking, why? Why does the apple fall? And the principle got revealed. Similarly, the ancient sages, they also felt that there must be ways of how to make the human, the individual permanently happy. That was their goal. And they took that thought and they sat in meditation. And to different seers of different times, Kathopanishad was one of the revelations that came about. And it is the dialogue between a young seeker and the Lord of Death. And this way, when we listen to the Upanishads, then we are not, we gain when we listen to the Upanishads or we listen to these type of thoughts, we gain a momentum which is not like a train or a bullock cart. It is like a rocket. Takes us straight away, it takes us to the destination, even while listening. So they wish us good luck for the next 7 days. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari